In this video, we'll be talking about the next chapter, chapter 9, which is the chemistry of some water and air reactive substances. Like the previous chapter, this will be split into 4 pieces, and so this is the first of those 4 pieces. Now, when we talk about water and air reactive substances, what we're really getting into for the most part are these, your DOT Class 4 hazardous materials. And so what we're talking about in particular here are, in general, solids that have either highly reactive natures or downright flammable natures. And so there are 3 subdivisions of this class. There are the flammable solids, which is given by this placard with the red-white stripes. There are the spontaneous combustible solids, which is given by this half-white, half-red placard. And then there are the dangerous when wet solids, which is given by this blue placard. Now, to qualify for any of these divisions, a material has to be something that is in the solid phase and can readily undergo combustion in the presence of an ignition source under circumstances that we would consider standard. That is, not terribly elevated temperatures, not terribly elevated pressures, and without changing variables or adding accelerants to them. So these are things that can burn on their own without any additional help, essentially. Now, each one of those classes has some each one of those subdivisions has some unique kinds of characteristics to them. So for class 4.1, the flammable solids, in order to be part of this subdivision, it has to meet one of the following criteria. It has to either be a desensitized explosive, that is, a substance that, when it's dry, belongs into class 1, the explosive materials, but has been wetted or treated with some kind of other material, other reagent, to suppress their explosive properties and make them more stable. And so that's what we mean by a desensitized explosive. The second group here are the self-reactive materials. These are things that are thermally unstable, and when they react, they can undergo a really strong thermal decomposition. And this can be done in the presence of air or even without oxygen. And then finally, we have the combustible solids. By definition, a combustible solid is a material that can cause a fire through friction or have a burning rate faster than 0.087 inches per second. Now, as we talked about when we looked at flammable liquids and flammable gases in some of our previous discussions and our previous units, what we have to consider is that most of the solids that are going to fall into this class, into this category, are going to be those that have vapor pressures and flashpoints. That is, these are going to be things that sublime, that vaporize relatively easily, and as a result of that vaporization, they're going to exert a vapor pressure, and they are going to have a flashpoint, a temperature at which they will begin to ignite. Now, flammable solids, in particular, what we have to worry about there is sublimation, going directly from the solid phase to the gas phase. And so a couple of common examples of this would be things like gum camphor and paradichlorobenzene. And both of these have flash points around 150 degrees Fahrenheit, which again is slightly elevated. It's certainly higher than room temperature, but it's not an inconceivable kind of temperature that's unattainable without extraordinary means. Now, the second subclass is the spontaneously combustible solid subclass, and this subclass includes 2 types of materials: the pyrophoric materials, that is, substances that once they are exposed to air will ignite within 5 minutes after their contact with air without any kind of external ignition source. So among these are a number of different materials. White phosphorus is probably the most common, the most well-known of them, but also any of the metals that are capable of burning would burn in this kind of pyrophoric way. The other idea, the other subclass in this, or subclass, are the self-heating materials. That is, materials that when they come into contact with air, their temperature rises. And so they begin to start to warm up as they encounter the air. And if they are allowed to warm up too much, then they ultimately will cause an ignition and a fire. The third subclass are the dangerous when wet subclass. Now, this subclass is known for any material that has a dangerous reaction with water. So this isn't just limited to flammability. Flammability is obviously one of the side effects and one of the most common byproducts of this reaction. But we can also see anything that involves a toxic gas evolution when water is contacted. So I have a substance, it comes into contact with water, and as it is coming into contact with water, it either ignites, gives off a flammable gas, or it gives off something toxic. And the rate of production of that flammable gas or that toxic gas is greater than a liter per kilogram per hour. Now, all of the reactions from a chemistry standpoint are called hydrolysis reactions. Hydrolysis reactions just mean that they are reactions with water. And what the hydrolysis reaction does is we can kind of think of hydrolysis reactions in this kind of context as a double replacement reaction. So if I think of water as hydrogen hydroxide instead of the molecule H2O, what I have is I have a cation, hydrogen, and an anion, hydroxide. And since I have a cation, potassium, and a cation, cyanide here, this is the classic double replacement kind of setup, where my cations, my potassium and my hydrogen, switch places, and I end up with HCN, hydrocyanic acid, and KOH, potassium hydroxide. Hydrocyanic acid is a toxic, really toxic, neurotoxic gas. And potassium hydroxide is a corrosive, and we've talked about corrosives in Chapter 8. This in particular is a base. So let's talk about metals in general and how they burn. Most metals, when they come into contact with water, aren't going to react very violently or at all. The only ones that really do react violently with water are your alkali metals, that is your group 1s, your sodiums, your potassiums, your rubidiums, that group, and your alkaline earth metals, your calciums in particular, to a lesser degree your magnesiums and your strontiums and so on. Other than that, we don't see a whole lot of reaction with water for any of the substances and any of the metals. But if we take them out of their bulk form, so we take them out of their large lump form, and we grind them into very fine powders, the increased surface area will actually cause the metal powders to react more violently and actually much more dangerously as a result. So if we look at it from that context, we can see that the sodium, when it reacts with water, will form a sodium hydroxide, a base, hydrogen gas, which is flammable, and heat. And so you get enough of these going on, the heat is actually high enough that it eventually might generate enough heat to burn the hydrogen, and you have a fire on your hands. For the calcium, similar kind of reaction takes place. We end up getting calcium hydroxide in addition to the hydrogen and the heat. And these are examples. This is a group 1 example. This is a group 2 example. These are common examples of these kinds of reactions that can take place. And as you go down the periodic table, the reactivity with water gets considerably larger. So lithium metal has a pretty decent reaction with water. Sodium definitely has a much more profound reaction. Potassium is the strongest of the three. Same thing goes for the alkaline earth metals as well. Beryllium barely reacts with any kind of noticeable change. Magnesium reacts if you let it sit for a really long time. Calcium reacts almost instantaneously. If you encounter an alkali metal fire, sodium, potassium, or the like, water and carbon dioxide are obviously going to be ineffective here. Water, because water reacts with the metal itself. Carbon dioxide does not pull away nearly enough heat to suffocate the flame itself. Usually with metal samples like that that are finer, carbon dioxide extinguisher will actually push the fine powders away, which will only help to spread the fire instead of put it out. So with alkali metal fires, we're usually looking at dry chemical, dry powder. So your kind of prototypical ABC fire extinguishers. And the danger with those, obviously, is the reagents inside of them are not things that you want to breathe a whole lot of and breathe them in. So in our next video, we will look at the combustible metals, and we'll look at some specific examples of the reactivity of some really common metals that are responsible for some certain types of fires. So until then, I'll see you next time.